Colleagues and honored guests, welcome to a special plenary of the USHCC Virtual Conference, 2020 Presidential Election, the Power of the Hispanic Vote. During today's program, we'll hear from the Honorable Ken Salazar, former U.S. Secretary of the Interior, U.S. Senator, and Colorado Attorney General, and a message from the presidential candidate himself, the Honorable Joe Biden. Joining us to begin our program is USHCC Board Member and Senior Vice President, Sales and External Affairs for Liberty Power, Mr. Nelson Reyneri.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you here today, and I am honored to serve on the board of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I am also honored to serve as Senior Vice President for Liberty Power, a Hispanic-owned company now approaching its 20th year, and one that has been able to grow in part because of the success of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber. We very much appreciate you joining us today for this important discussion. And before starting, I'd like to express my appreciation to my fellow board of directors, as well as Ramiro and his wonderful team, for hosting this important conference and this important conversation today. I also want to thank our sponsors, our local Hispanic chambers, and the close to 5 million Hispanic-owned businesses that contribute each day to our economic recovery. Being part of family-owned businesses in the past, I appreciate these Hispanic businesses driving our economic recovery. At the Chamber, we believe that your vote is your voice, that economic power and political power go hand in hand. To that end, this session is dedicated to the upcoming election around the corner. Given that the debate is in less than 48 hours, it was not possible to have the Vice President speak to us at this time. But it's interesting that we saw that video of Rita Moreno, because we have what may be unprecedented, which is someone that not just only knows the Vice President well, but has been a cabinet member, a senator, and the state attorney general. I had the privilege of getting to know Senator Salazar when I worked for Senator Kerry and later led the DNC Hispanic outreach in 2004. And what's impressive about the senator's leadership is not just all his accomplishments, but it's the way that he weaves and lives his values out daily and his legacy to this country and what he does every single day. Let me tell you a little bit about the senator. Senator Ken Salazar and his family have farmed along the banks of the Rio Grande River in New Mexico and Colorado for more than 4 centuries. In 1998, he was elected as Colorado Attorney General and became the first Latino ever elected to statewide office in Colorado. The secretary was reelected as Attorney General in 2002. 2 years later, Attorney General Salazar was elected to the United States Senate for Colorado, becoming the first Latino Democrat to be elected to the Senate since 1972. Then in 2009, President Obama nominated him to serve as Secretary of Interior, where he had a lead role on the Obama-Biden agenda on energy and climate, the nation's conservation agenda, including America's great outdoors and Indian country. Secretary Salazar has been a lifelong fighter for civil rights and the inclusion of Latinos and the American dreams. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and a privilege to introduce Senator Ken Salazar.
Thank you very much, Nelson. It is an honor. Thank you very much, Nelson. It's an honor for me to be here. It's an honor for me to be with the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. You know, when I was growing up in the San Luis Valley, my father would always say to us, "Dime con quien andas y te diré quién eres. Dime con quien andas y te diré quién eres." I am so proud to be with all of you today and to be with Alice Rodriguez, with Carmen Castillo, to be with Victor Arias and the CEO, Ramiro Cavazos, and thank you to the sidekicks, to Leroy and Brianna and Richard and all of you who have made this possible. So dime con quien andas y te diré quién eres. It is our honor to be walking with Joe Biden as I have walked with him for almost 2 decades now, and to be walking with the Latino community around the country on so many issues that are so important in this paramount election that this November will determine so much about the future of the Latino community, the United States of America, and how we become an inclusive America that honors and respects the Latino community. And with that, I would like you to hear directly from the Vice President himself.
Hey, everyone. I'm glad to have a chance to speak with you today because I understand the success and prosperity of the Latino American community is indispensable to the success and prosperity of the United States of America and all Americans. It's that simple. Latinos make an incredible contribution to the economic health of our nation. You're the driving growth at the incredible rate of speed, and you're the entrepreneurial spirit and energy that we need. I know that this pandemic, this economic collapse, has hit Latino communities particularly hard. Nearly 40,000 Latinos, 40,000 have died, nearly 40,000. And COVID-19 is devastating families and close-knit communities and losing loved ones. There's empty chairs at the table this morning at breakfast. Look, more than 3 million Latinos are unemployed. 1 in 3 Latino small business owners have taken a hit, and many will likely have to close permanently because of the way President Trump has mismanaged the response to the pandemic. But even before this pandemic hit, Donald Trump showed us how little respect he had for the industry and contributions of Latinos in our country. He terrorized and threatened Latino communities for his own political gain. He fanned the flames of hate and division in our country with deadly results. And the economy he loves to brag about wasn't doing all that well for working folks before. His tax cuts overwhelmingly went to big corporations and the super wealthy in our society. Now he thinks the richest 100 people in America need another $30 billion tax cut instead of focusing on education and other things we should be doing. The only measures of economic success Donald Trump cares about is the stock market. I measure it on how mom and pop businesses are doing, how Latino-owned businesses are doing, the ones that keep communities together, the center and the heart of the community. I think we need to reward work in this country, not just wealth. I think we need to give small and medium business owners a break, not big corporations. They're not bad, but they're not the ones that need the help. I think we need to pay people who a living wage and treat them with respect and dignity they deserve, especially our frontline workers who are putting it all on the line and many giving their lives during this pandemic. I know who built this country. It was hard-working people just like your families and mine. The Latinos helped lead us back from the last recession, and I'm confident you'll do the same thing again, lead the way. That's why my plan to build the economy back better is focused on helping build equality and equity for everyone across our society, including among Latinos. My plan to get $50 billion in capital flowing to small businesses, especially minority-owned small businesses, and make another $100 billion in low-interest business loans available to those same businesses. Latinos in this country are responsible for $2.6 trillion. $2.6 trillion of our GDP, and it's growing. I know you know that, but most people don't. That's because we invest in Latinos. In your success, we're making one of the smartest possible investments with the greatest possible returns for our nation for a long, long time to come. That's what I intend to do as president, with your support and your partnership. And when elected, if elected, I'm going to need your help. Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, thank you so much for your leadership and for what you have done and said about the Latino community. I've had the honor of working closely with the Vice President for a long time and had the honor of helping craft the Latino Biden agenda for when he becomes president. And I will note, based on the introduction of the video that you had, that the Smithsonian Latino Museum on the National Mall, which has been a dream that many of us have worked on for a very long time, is in that agenda. It is a 19-page agenda that addresses the issues and challenges of the Latino community, recognizing what the Vice President said and what the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce stands for, and that is that the future of the United States of America is inextricably tied to the Latino community, our demographics, our economic contribution. With over 60 million Latinos in the United States, the Vice President has often talked about this with me, that he recognizes that 1 in 4 school-age children in the United States are Latino. He recognizes that 1 in 5 Latinos in the United States are one of 5 people in the United States are Latino, so 20% of our population is Latino. So the future of our economy and the future of our democracy really depends on making sure that the Latino community is fully a part of the American dream and a part of the American society. Now, some people, and I know a lot of people with the chamber, right? And I've spoken to the U.S. Hispanic Chamber before, a wonderful organization. If you think about 250 Hispanic chambers all over the United States, I remember starting them, helping them with the Denver Latino Chamber, with Trinidad, with Pueblo here in Colorado. And then in my national days, the honor of working with the U.S. Hispanic Chamber, your days too are very positive. The best days of the Chamber is still ahead. And so much of it has to do with the growing economic power of the small business community, where Latinos and Latinas are starting small businesses all over this country at a faster rate than anybody else. And so what you do as a U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is critically important to Vice President Biden, critically important to his entire team. I want to step back just for a minute and let you know about my own relationship with Joe Biden, because I have known him for a long time. He helped me become the first Latino elected to the United States Senate in 2004, when others around the country didn't believe that it could be done. I was able to do it here in Colorado with the help of the Vice President, with the help of so many of you who are on this call. So I know him in the sense of his corazón Latino. I worked with him in the US Senate on matters relating to immigration and Latin America. He and John McCain and Ted Kennedy and I spearheaded the efforts on comprehensive immigration reform when I was in the US Senate. And then moving fast forward, he was a senator, as was Barack Obama, when they asked me if I would become Secretary of the Interior, where I would have responsibility for all of America's land and water and resources, and importantly, being the custodian of America's heritage, which brought about, through the Vice President's push and recommendation, monuments like the Cesar Chavez National Monument in La Paz, the monuments for Harriet Tubman, and so many other things that we were able to do to recognize and celebrate the diversity of the United States of America. I remember coming to Denver with President Obama and Vice President Biden. I was on Air Force One on the way out here with President Obama. And here in Denver at the Natural History Museum, he signed the Recovery Act. Your businesses are all, I'm sure, still reflecting and knowing, because it didn't happen so long ago, the huge crisis that America found itself in 2008. And so when we came into office, the highest priority became, how can we stand up the economy again? How can we create jobs for the more than 10 million people who had gone unemployed before Barack Obama took office? President Obama signed the bill here in Denver with Joe Biden. I then went with the Vice President on the plane on Air Force Two back to Washington, D.C. We were on the plane together when President Obama called the Vice President and said to him, Mr. Vice President Joe, he says, I need you to run the recovery because there's so much money, $800 billion that was going to be invested to stimulate the economy. He said, and I want it to be run with precision. So you need to be the chair of a cabinet committee that I'll put together to administer how we're going to get the economy moving again. I was proud to serve on that committee with the Vice President, meeting with him weekly. He called governors and mayors and so many people all around the country. And yes, indeed, by the time that we were a year and a half into the administration, we had the economy back. And at the end of the Obama-Biden administration, we had a roaring economy here in the United States of America. And we were tackling other tough issues, like with the Affordable Care Act, providing health insurance for people. And we're trying to make sure that we were creating an America that was one of decency and recognition of the importance of everyone, but the Latino community in particular, dreamers who had come to this country, who were trying to find a way of life for themselves, and the 11 million people who were undocumented and lived in the shadows of our society in fear every day of being deported. That was our agenda. That was our dream. That was Vice President Biden's agenda. And so when he asked me to support him for president, I didn't have to think long about it because I knew him and I knew his heart. He's a man of great courage, of great decency. He's had his own struggles in life, just like many people in our community, many of you who are listening to this call. What happened to him as a young senator at 29, losing his wife and daughter in a car accident. I watched him with Beau Biden, his son, the Attorney General of Delaware, who was a very good friend of mine. And I watched the courage of the Vice President standing up again and somehow summoning that courage that only comes through his faith, that you find purpose in life by giving to others. I often, in my introductions of the vice president, would quote the stanza from Cesar Chavez's prayer to the United Farm Workers: God grant me the courage to serve others, because in service there is true life. That is what Vice President Biden is all about. And that's why he is running for president, to serve the needs and the people of the United States of America with courage and with decency. And that very much includes the Latino community. Now, I want to say a couple of things about the business agenda for the vice president, because it's important to you. He recognizes the economic contributions of the Latino community. And as he said in the video, and this is information that the Latino Donor Collaborative, people like Victor and so many others who are involved with that great collaborative by Sal Trujillo and Henry and a whole host of other people. But he recognizes that the findings that were set forth in that report that were just released a couple of days ago are absolutely correct. $2.6 trillion in economic contribution by the Latino community. He recognizes that. He recognizes that that GDP is bigger than the GDP of South Korea. It is bigger than the GDP of Brazil today. And so the importance of that economic contribution is important as it stands today. But it's also even more important because we know that the demographics of the United States are changing, and we're going to have even a greater Latino population, with 1 in 4 school-age children now being Latinos here in the United States. Now, small businesses, we know there are 4.7 million Hispanic-owned businesses. The United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce does an incredible job by uniting the Latino community across the country. Hispanics in Louisiana and Washington State and Florida and New Mexico and Colorado, where so many of you are from. In every state of our country, we are growing. In every community of our country, we are present. And the small business engine of all of our people is part of the future of the economy of this country. So we recognize that, and we appreciate that very, very much. Now, today, the United States of America finds itself in a huge series of crises like the ones we have not seen probably since the pandemic of 1918 or the Great Depression and the looming clouds of World War II. And one thing about the crises that are coming your way, for you as small businesses, you feel it particularly hard. We have the pandemic. We have the economic dislocation and disruption that's creating unemployment, that is closing down businesses, including many Latino small businesses who are suffering. So there's a pandemic, there's the economic suffering that is happening because of the pandemic. There is a whole set of issues of systemic racism, which is part of the reason why the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is formed, to make sure that we combated that systemic racism and that we had the opportunity to give everybody an opportunity. But that is a crisis point in America today. And that's not even reaching the point, Nielsen, of some of the other existential issues like the energy economy that you deal with, the Liberty Power. Those are issues which we have to deal with. So when you look at the confluence of these crises, what you really need for the United States of America is a proven leader, someone who will deliver results, someone who, when President Obama turned to and said, "Will you lead the economic recovery?" in 2009, he said yes, and he did. And you watched it, and I watched it. And so we need somebody that will help us address all of these issues. Now, the vice president's program is laid out in detail. The Latino agenda is a 19-page document. I invite you all to read it. We can get it to you. But it includes in there how he will take on day one, for example, immigration reform, take on an expanded Dreamers program, but importantly for small businesses, making sure that we're investing in the economy and creating opportunities for the small businesses of America. Part of the Build Back Better program for small businesses includes additional $1.5 billion that will go into new capital. As a small business owner, I'm a rancher and a farmer. You know, my wife, when I was a U.S. Senator, ran a Dairy Queen. I know what it's like to be a small business and to have to struggle for capital. So there will be a pot of money for access that will provide you the access to capital that you all need as small businesses. There will be a program that he's outlined in his agenda to eliminate the barriers to federal procurement. We know the United States government is the largest purchaser of goods and services in the country. We need to have access to having those contracts go to Latino businesses around the country. That will be a priority of a Biden-Harris administration. You know, it's interesting when one looks at the economic plans that have been put out by the vice president. You know, I sometimes wonder whether the other side, President Trump, really has an economic plan at all. Indeed, I think there's a lot of hyperbole and exaggeration and noise and shouting that come from him, but I don't see a plan. I didn't see a plan on how we got through the pandemic. I happen to know something about healthcare. I happen to know something about pandemics too. And I don't think Donald Trump had a plan and did not lead our country in the way that any of us can be proud of. And now with 200,000 plus Americans who are dead, business after business shutting down, we didn't have the right leadership. He may not have brought the virus here to the United States, but certainly what he did is he didn't handle the pandemic that came from it in the way the Vice President Biden handled it in the Ebola crisis and in the way we were ready to handle a pandemic under the Obama-Biden times. So it could have been handled in a way that would have saved American lives and would have saved American businesses. That is a for sure. Joe Biden is ready to lead on that issue on day one. Moody's has done an analysis of the jobs plan, the economic plan that Vice President Biden has put out. And it shows that his job plan will create 18.6 million jobs in the United States of America. That's something that we need, something that we're very proud of, something that can be tremendously helpful to the Latino businesses all around this country. I got to say something about Latinas. You know, yes, there are many small businesses that are owned by Latinos. I don't know the exact statistic, but I would imagine that there are as many, if not more, that are owned by Latinas. People like Maria's Empanadas right here in Denver that employs several dozens of people. Companies that I know in Arizona and in Florida that are employing lots of Latinos and non-Latinos owned by Latinas here in the United States. And so part of what we will do in a Biden-Harris administration is to make sure that the role of women is celebrated and the role of Latinas in small business is also lifted up. Let me finally just say that for me, this is the most important election of my life. I have worked hard in my life to dedicate myself to my profession as a lawyer, to my career in public service, to others. I, as a Latino, have never been so offended by the disrespect that we have received under the hands and through the mouth of Donald Trump. I remember standing so proudly, in fact, with some of you who are on this call, in La Paz, California, with the United Farm Workers of America, and making the Cesar Chavez burial site a national monument as part of our effort to tell the story of the United States of America. And every time that I'd walk into the United States Capitol or walk into the White House for meetings with Vice President Biden, I would always remember the progress that we had made as a Latino community. My dad and mom were poor farmers and ranchers, but they were proud Americans. My father, a proud veteran and soldier in World War II, buried in his uniform because that's how he wanted to celebrate America. My mother, a servant in World War II who helped open up the Pentagon, moving the War Department into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. They did not know that their children would become what they became, but they did know that the United States of America allowed them if they worked hard, worked by the rules, to achieve the American dream. So all 8 of their children became first-generation college graduates. We grew up without electricity and without telephone on our ranch in the San Luis Valley. And certainly they could not have foreseen that someday one of their sons would become a member of the president's cabinet or become a United States senator or an attorney general. But we did all of that because there was opportunity that was created for us. Now, that American dream, in my view, is at a precipice of the greatest threat that we have ever seen in the last 100 years. And that's because this president, Donald Trump, has characterized Latinos in a way that is negative, that is harmful, calling us criminals, building walls, doing the kinds of things to the dreamers and to the 11 million people that has separated children from their mothers and their fathers. I have met many of them because they still come to me when I go to church at Our Lady of Guadalupe. And they say, when will we stop living in fear? We need a president that will unite everyone in the United States of America. And when we unite people here in this country, the best is yet to come. And that best is yet to come with a complete inclusion of the Latino community, the Latino business community, our small businesses in this country. That's what will power our economy back. And so as we get ready in the remaining 30 plus days that we have before the final vote is cast on November 3rd, we ask you to support Vice President Biden and Kamala Harris with your vote and with your organization to become the next president and vice president of the United States. Thank you very much, Nielsen. And with that, I will turn it back to you.
Senator, thank you so much. That was beyond inspiring. And when I think about your family going back 400 years, maybe it's because you have such an ability to look backwards that makes it so clear, the ability to project forward the vision that you want for our country and the things that you've been fighting for and the close relationship you have with the vice president. It's really important for us to have this conversation with you, to hear what we've heard from you and to continue building together. So thank you so much again for your leadership. Please know how appreciated it is on behalf of all of us. Right now, we're very honored also to have questions from, as the senator said, from throughout the country. Our first question is going to come from Mayor Jimmy Matta from the great city of Burlen in Washington. Mayor Matta?
Muchas gracias, Señor Secretario. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for the words of inspiration as we move closer to the election on November 3rd. As the founder and president of Ahora Construction in Washington State, a proud Hispanic-owned construction company, a small business, I have consistently diversified in looking for new avenues of contracting to continue the growth of my business. As mayor of Burlen, Washington, I witnessed firsthand many minority businesses in this similar situation of needing to secure new contacts to grow and scale to take their business to the next level. The Biden for President campaign recently launched the Nuestro Negocio, Nuestro Futuro, focused on expansion of small minority businesses. How will the Vice President help businesses like mine access federal contracting opportunities, make their playing field in corporate America more equitable for companies like mine? And what kind of leadership roles can Latinos expect in this process as proposed in this platform? Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mayor Matta, and thank you for your great leadership, and also not only just in your small business, but also in your role as a mayor. We appreciate what you have done. It is a very important question that you ask, because one of the things that many of the small Hispanic, Latino businesses around the country did get their opportunities in part by being included in federal procurement programs and other kinds of programs. So when one thinks about the agenda of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber, it is important that the United States as a government, as a large purchaser of products and services, have a very effective program that is equitable, that reaches out to the Latino community to make sure that they are being included in the dollars that are flowing out from the federal government. The Vice President has been very clear. We're going to invest in the United States in a very major way. The infrastructure investments that are going to be made are going to be historic in nature. the Latino contractors, the business community, companies like yours, Mayor, need to be part of that. You need to receive a part of that richness that is going to flow from the creation of the incentives to bring our economy back again. And so the president will have a robust program that makes sure that it is reaching out to the Latino and Latina community and other minority communities throughout the United States of America. In addition to that, you lead by example, right? And so if the federal government could do that, companies ought to be doing that as well. And I know the chamber does a lot to try to bring in big corporations to provide opportunities on procurement, on the diversity side, and that needs to happen. That needs to happen. So what I can tell you is Vice President Biden and Senator Harris, when she becomes vice president, will do the kind of outreach to make sure that companies like yours in the state of Washington are included in all of what is going to be the economic renaissance of America that's going to be very focused on small business. Senator Harris went to Florida to start, as you mentioned, Mayor, Nuestros Negocios, Nuestro Futuro. And we're having those kinds of roundtables and discussions at this point in the campaign all over the country. There will be one coming to most of the states, I'm sure, that are on this call today, because we know the power of the Latino small business community. Thank you very much, Mayor, for your question.
Mr. Mayor, thank you again for everything you're doing in Burlen. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, one of the key strengths of our chamber is our local chambers, our regional chambers. We have tremendous leadership throughout the country, and we can't overstate their important role. Very honored now to introduce a colleague on the board, Mayra Pineda from the Louisiana Chamber. Mayra?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for addressing the USHCC today. As President and CEO of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Louisiana, we are part of a network of more than 250 Hispanic chambers of commerce across America who have been working diligently and tirelessly to make sure our economy revitalizes after the COVID-19 pandemic. This year, we as chambers have had to overcome many challenges due to the COVID economic crisis in each of our communities. Some of our chambers have had to furlough or suspend operations, and those that remain have worked around the clock to provide technical assistance in English and in Spanish to help our small businesses at this difficult economic time, working harder than ever before with less resources. We have done so without any help from the federal government, as nonprofits of our status have not been given access to the stimulus money related to COVID-19. How will Vice President Biden ensure that small 501c6 chambers of commerce, such as ours, have a seat at the decision-making tables of America to ensure we get a fair shot to recovery after COVID-19?
Mayra, thank you so much for the question. And let me say, I have been in all 50 states of the United States of America, including probably 20 or 30 times in every one of the states, including Louisiana. And I got to say this about New Orleans. You see the Latino history and the very diverse history etched into that city in New Orleans and throughout the state of Louisiana. And so I'm so proud, Mayra, that you are the leader of the Hispanic Chamber in Louisiana. It is incredibly important for the future of Louisiana. It's also incredibly important for us to tell that rich history of the Latino contributions in the state of and throughout the nation. So thank you for asking that question. So the Vice President Biden and Senator Harris are believers in inclusivity, in diversity. And so the Hispanic chambers throughout this country, and the U.S. Hispanic Chamber, will be welcome in the White House. And your views and your input will always be something that will help guide the economic renaissance and recovery of the United States. Now, we know that the COVID relief package that was supposed to be considered, which passed the House, but wasn't taken up by the Senate, and not supported by the president now, is in limbo. But that legislation, if it does pass, would hopefully provide additional relief to the small businesses who are suffering because of what's happened with the pandemic. If one thinks about what's happening with restaurants, with other small businesses that are very much affected by the pandemic, there needs to be relief. We're going to get through the pandemic. The Vice President has a plan, which I have seen, and I have been a part of the group on the pandemic, discussing how we put that together. And we are going to get through the pandemic. But at the other end of the pandemic, there's going to be a lot of economic wreckage. And that economic wreckage could be mitigated, at least in some form, if we had a president of the United States who was willing to sit down today and deal with both the Senate and the House, Republicans and Democrats, Democrats and Republicans, to address this crisis, this economic crisis that we're seeing ourselves in. And when that is done, you would have a new COVID package that would be prepared and enacted into law to help small businesses. And in that context, the question that you raise on support for nonprofits is something that could certainly be considered in those discussions. So thank you, Mayra, for that question.
Thank you again for that question and for highlighting those issues, and would like to highlight that available through the portal today. You can see our policy platform, and highly encourage you to take a look at that, give us feedback. And thank you again, Senator, for allowing us to be part of the discussions as you and the team and campaign have developed very specific plans that we're very excited about. Another leader that's fantastic in so many ways, and also has an energy background, the land of enchantment, our own Ernie the Baca.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your leadership in our Hispanic community during your tenure as Secretary of the Interior and as U.S. Senator in our neighboring state of Colorado. As you know, our Hispanic community is leading our country's economic recovery. You and yourself said we're larger than Brazil's economy. Prior to the pandemic, Hispanic-owned businesses were the fastest growing business community in America, starting businesses at 3 times the rate of the national average, and Latino women starting at 6 times that rate. We are also the youngest and fastest growing community in the country, already becoming the majority in several communities, joining New Mexico, a majority minority state since statehood. As we continue to grow, and if elected, how will the Biden-Harris administration make sure that all underserved communities have a seat at the table, at the national decision-making table? How will we as Latinas and Latinos play a role in leadership positions in the Biden-Harris administration, including the presidential cabinet?
Ernie, thank you so much for the question. When I was in the U.S. Senate, they used to call me the 3rd senator from New Mexico. And interestingly, I received an article last night that said that in 1870, there was an effort by the then territorial representative in Congress for New Mexico to try to include what is a southwestern part of Colorado into New Mexico. So the San Luis Valley and over into Durango and Cortez in that area would have all been part of New Mexico. So I had the great honor of working on a host of issues in New Mexico in my life, ranging from the creation of the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument in Taos, New Mexico by President Obama and Vice President Biden, the Organ Mountains Monument down in the south, and working on a variety of issues, including the wildlife refuge that we have right there in Albuquerque, New Mexico, along the Rio Grande. The question of diversity is something that is so dear to me, but I know that it is that dear to Vice President Biden and to Kamala Harris. They are champions of diversity and inclusion. And I want to point out 3 or 4 points that are important to that. First, when the Vice President and I had a conversation back in March about how we were going to move forward, one of the things that we talked about was that this presidential campaign would be different from other presidential campaigns in history, that we would have an inclusive campaign that brought in the Latino community, not as an afterthought. You're from all different states, and many of you, I know Ernie, others have been involved in the political world for a long time. And what happens in these major campaigns for president or even for the US Senate, the Latino community is kind of an afterthought. 2 weeks before the election, they'll spend a little bit of money on a couple radio stations and hire a couple staff, and that's how it's done. Not this time. The Latino community has been at the heart of this campaign from day one. On this call today with me, for example, is Cristóbal Joshua Alex, who is a wonderful Latino and a senior advisor to Joe Biden for the last year. He and I are partners in implementing this agenda. Jason Rodriguez, who is an awesome director of coalitions. Julie Rodriguez Chavez, the granddaughter of Cesar Chavez, whose first job she got in my office when I was a US Senator. She helped me campaign here in Colorado when I was running for the US Senate. We have Latino state directors. Check this out. The people who are running the most important states, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, other states like Texas, they are led by Latino state directors. Within the organization, we have Latino vote directors in 11 of our battleground states. So throughout the campaign, we have been integrated into the campaign and the vice president's vision of including us. And then in resources, no presidential campaign in history has ever invested in outreach into the Latino community in the way that Vice President Biden has, whether it's through our broadcast media or digital media in places like Florida and Nevada and Texas and Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, those states. We are investing in a major way into the Latino community because we believe that they need to be included. The third point I'd make to your great question, Ernie, is it is important for us to make sure that we have an administration that looks like America. 1 in 5 American citizens are Latinos, 1 in 5, 20%. And yet, when I was talking to Ramiro Cavazos, we were talking about how the first Latino that was put into a cabinet position was by President Reagan. Secretary of Education, Laurel Cavazos, some of you would remember him. I met him, Secretary of Education. You look at what's happened in administration since then, and I remember when Bill Clinton was president, we had the great Federico Peña, mayor of Denver, and just a wonderful friend, and by the way, part of our national steering committee for Joe Biden. And we had people like Henry Cisneros, a great friend and a mentor of mine. I remember going to Washington. I think I was testifying at some hearing as Attorney General. And I remember going to Washington and visiting Federico Peña at transportation and crossing the street to go visit Henry Cisneros. And I thought to myself, we have arrived. We have 2 Latinos on the cabinet of the United States of America. Well, let me tell you, Vice President Biden and Kamala Harris believe in that agenda. So we will have more Latinos and Latinas in this administration than ever in history. And the way we're going to do that, and my specific recommendation to the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, is get the names to us. We will get the names into the transition committee, and then we will populate the cabinet. There are some 1,600 positions that are appointed by the president. We want to be ready to govern on day one. But I can assure you, because I know who's running the transition and I know who's working in that transition, that the Latino community is going to be represented at the table. And Ernie, you know this, and every one of the presidents of the chamber and the member of the board and the members of the chambers who are on this call know this, that if we're not at the table of decision making, then we become an afterthought. We won't be a priority. I will guarantee you on my life that Joe Biden will make us the priority because we will be at that table.
Oh, that's so exciting to hear, Senator Ernie. Thanks again for that great question. And Senator, thanks for putting those things in context, especially as someone who had actually worked for a while in presidential personnel office during the Clinton administration. Your point is so welcome. To hear you proactively reach out and extend a hand to us, that means a lot to us. This last question is also very personal because as someone who came from Cuba as a small child and was the first to go to college in his family, it was always a dream. And when it became a reality, it just deepened our appreciation, our love for this country. So to see the DACA situation and see the level of what you were talking about before with immigration, so deeply painful, and it's hard to believe. We have a wonderful lawyer who deals with this, Erica from Ronquillo Hubs, and she has a question about this from Miami. Hi, Erica.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being with us today and making our Hispanic business community a top priority in this election cycle and for the Biden campaign. For decades, many in our government have attempted to address the serious concerns of the U.S. immigration system, a system that oftentimes casts the most vulnerable in America's shadows, a system that oftentimes paints the southern border as a war zone, and a system that oftentimes does not recognize that immigrants are not here to take jobs, but to drive innovation and growth for the American economy. How will a Biden-Harris administration address the urgent need for immigration reform, a founding principle of our democracy and our country? How can we achieve comprehensive immigration reform while treating people with dignity, having them feel safe as Americans in their own country, keeping our borders safe using technology, and working with Congress to provide our federal agencies with the resources to come to a modern solution on this issue?
Erica, thank you for what you do as a lawyer and for being a spokesperson for so many people who need a great lawyer to help deal with the immigration issues. So let me just say, Erica, we have, as part of our Latino agenda, as part of our national agenda, Vice President Biden is ready to move on immigration on day one. So mark my word, January 20th, you get an executive order immediately that protects the dreamers and expands the DACA program. Unlike Donald Trump, who has done everything within his power to end the DACA program multiple times through his executive actions and through litigation. On day one, with Vice President Biden, what you will have is the legislation that will go to the Congress. We will get that on day one on comprehensive immigration reform. You, Erica, you and Nielsen and others talk so eloquently about our history as a nation of immigrants and the openness, the Statue of Liberty, which I have been to so many times, that welcomed people to the shores of America, that made our country what our country became. And yet this president, when he speaks, especially about Latinas and Latinos, he likes to talk about us as being not even second class, as dangerous criminals, as people who don't contribute to this society. You look at his cabinet and you got to ask yourself, are we represented around that table? To Ernie's question earlier, we're not. But to look at the meanness of this person who will carry a Bible in his hand for a photo op in front of St. John's Episcopal Church in Washington, that's what Donald Trump does. He has somehow done the most disastrous things to step on the Latino community and our history of any president, probably since James Polk before the Mexican-American War. Probably since then, almost 150 years ago. What he's done is he said, I'm going to build this wall and I'm going to have the Mexicans pay for it. And last night in the speech that he gave in Pennsylvania, he was bragging about his 318 miles of wall that he had built in between the United States and Mexico, saying that he was keeping out all the dangerous people. Well, that doesn't sit well with me. I'm sure it doesn't sit well with you, the members of the chamber. You know, I looked at some of the video that was taken from the detention centers with children who are crying for their dads and their moms who've been separated from them. Eso no es esta nación. Eso me duele en mi corazón. That is unchristian, what Donald Trump has done to our community. And yet somehow he pretends that he's this Christian person and that somehow Joe Biden is not a man of faith. The contrary is true. I know Joe Biden's faith. I know how he respects the Latino community. I know what he did to try to elevate a better relationship between the United States and Latin America. And so, Erica, the issue that you raise here is one of the fundamental issues where we can't let Donald Trump get away by making this a political win. You know, for me, when I was Secretary of the Interior, I had the honor of being in line of succession to the presidency of the United States. I think they go by cabinet status. I think I was number 7 or 8. I was in that line with the vice president. But I had his support, and I had President Obama's support to do things like create a binational conservation area, Big Bend National Park with Mexico. I had their support as I worked with President Calderon in Mexico to address the issues of water on the Colorado River and to create the environmental restoration of the Colorado River Delta on the Mexican side. Now, that's about building bridges and relationships that should be there. Some of them which go back, like many of your families and like my family, 4 centuries. Some of us don't go back that far, but the relationships are still the same. The people to the south, whether it's from Ecuador or Peru, Colombianos, Venezolanos, all the Central American countries or Mexico, they are our brothers and they are our sisters. And with our hermanas and our hermanos, it is time that we elect Joe Biden so we can create the kind of relationship that honors the history, that says to the world, Latin America and Latinos are important here in the United States, but our relationship internationally with Latin America is also a priority of mine. And I can guarantee you that that is who Joe Biden is, and that's what he will deliver. So thank you, Erica, for that question.
Senator, we're getting close to the end, so just another opportunity to thank you in closing to highlight a few things. One of the things that also excites us about the relationship with the Biden camp and with you in particular is that we're not just limited to talking issues that traditionally have been Latino issues, Hispanic issues. For example, your leadership in energy is something, as someone that works in an energy company at Liberty Power, that is increasingly more and more important to everyone across the country. We're at an existential point, as you've mentioned. We'd like to see that develop and continue stronger. In closing, there's 3 things that, if possible, we'd like to highlight as a request. And one is, I know that time is difficult, but like today with the video, the ability to hear directly at some point from the vice president, that would be fantastic. The second one you already addressed, which is very important. During a transition, we want to feel included. We want to be part of it. We want to be facilitators and enablers to making that agenda real. We believe in it. And then the last is within 100 days, and you also spoke to this, we would love the opportunity to have the chamber visit with the vice president and his team, the White House, and really talk about that recovery and how we can play a contributing factor even more than we're doing so today. So muchísimas gracias por su tiempo hoy. It's always a pleasure and an honor to see you. You represent the best in America, and we're very proud. And in a way, we felt today we had 3 people today. We had a senator, a secretary, and an attorney general. So we won the trifecta. So we can't thank you enough. And in closing, I'll leave it to you if there's any last remarks that you want to share with us. But muchísimas gracias de nuevo. Many blessings.
Nielsen, thank you so much. And I know there's a lot that we didn't cover today that we could cover. For example, the energy future of the United States of America and how we deal with the existential issue of climate and energy, but do it in a way that's going to create jobs for the United States of America and for the world. we have a plan, and we're going to do that. And I know your company and other companies that are leading the way in terms of making people understand that we can do a lot of different things. I remember when I was working with the vice president on our renewable energy plans, where people thought we were crazy because they would say we're trying to chase the sun. Well, by the time the vice president left office, we had permitted over 20,000 megawatts of renewable energy power on public lands alone, and mapped out the oceans of America, done a whole host of things that are very important to that subject. So look up our policy positions, because the one thing you know about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we have plans. Unlike Donald Trump, I don't know what his plans are. Even after 4 years of being president, I know what Joe Biden's plans are, and there are plans that are very worthy of the United States of America. And let me, on your requests, obviously great requests. On your second request specifically, maybe Ramiro could follow up with me or with Cristóbal or with me directly. I'm happy to do that, just to talk through about some of the things that might be done, because this is a real-time issue. It's not one that should wait until after the election. So why don't you have Ramiro maybe follow up with me, or Nilsson, you can give me a call on my cell phone number, and I'd be happy to talk to you. And finally, just in conclusion to all of you, I've been honored, privileged in so many ways to serve you, to serve the United States of America, to have the life that I have had the privilege of living in this great country. But I am afraid. I tell you, I am afraid of what will happen with this country if Donald Trump were to get reelected. Says he will not engage potentially in a peaceful transfer of power. Some of the other things that he is saying, that's not the country that I know. I've been in Iraq, I've been in Afghanistan, I've traveled in places where the rule of law is not upheld and celebrated. So when we say this election is the most important election of our lifetimes, I know it is for me. Without a doubt, this is the most important election of our lifetime. And voting is already going on. Voting has started in North Carolina and in other states. Here in my state of Colorado, October 9th, the ballots will drop. And so I would ask all of you, as part of your civic duty, to get involved personally as an individual through your Hispanic and Latino chambers, the 250 of them around the country, in your states. Because at the end of the day, the dream that we all have for the 62 million Latinos who now live in this United States of America and call it their home, that dream is on the ballot box this November. So please join us and Vice President Biden and Senator Harris in winning this election this November 3rd. Thank you very much. Mil gracias.
Senator, thank you very much, and thank the campaign, and we look forward to deepening that relationship. And again, thank you for being such a servant leader and inspiring us today. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you everyone for participating, and we'll go back now to the next part of the presentation, or excuse me, I think it's the music that comes next. Thank you. Enjoy the presentation.
Honored guests, distinguidos miembros, for your entertainment pleasure, he's appeared on opera stages around the globe in Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, and Germany, singing in Spanish, Italian, and Latin, and now joins us, accompanied by pianist Sergio Salani. Welcome, opera cantante Carlos de Antonis.
Hello, welcome to all of you of the USHCC. Sergio and I are two proud Latino artists and happy to be joining you today. Our first song is Bésame Mucho.
Bésame mucho, como si fuera esta noche la última vez. Ay, bésame, 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 ay, bésame mucho. perderme después. Quiero tenerte en mis brazos, sentirme muy cerca, verte junto a mí. Ay, piensa que tal vez mañana tú ya estarás lejos, muy lejos de aquí. Ay, bésame, bésame mucho, como si fuera esta noche la última vez. Ay, bésame, bésame, ay, bésame mucho, que tengo miedo perderte y perderme después. Acaríciame en sueño el suave murmullo de tu suspirar, como rigue la vida si tus ojos negros me quieren mirar. Y si es mío el amparo de tu risa leve, que es como un cantar, ella quieta mi herida, todo se olvida. El día que me quieras, la rosa que engalana se vestirá de fiesta con su mejor color, y al viento las campanas dirán que ella eres mía, y locas las fontanas le contarán su amor. La noche que me quieras, desde el azul del cielo, las estrellas celosas nos mirarán pasar, y un rayo misterioso hará nido luciérnagas curiosas que verán que eres mi consuelo. Curiosas que verán que eres mi consuelo. Caro amore, io ti voglio dire che per me tu sei tutta la vita. Su questo golfo di sorriento dell'odio Caro amore, io ti voglio dire che tu sei la gioia dei miei giorni. Su questo volo di sriento te lo giuro che non vorrei la vita senza te. Stai vicino a me, e se non tornerai, lo so, la vita se ne andrà. Stai vicino a me, e se non tornerai, lo so, la vita se ne anderà. Caro amore, vedo nel tuo viso, vedo chiaro tutti i tuoi pensieri. Solo se sei vicino ed accanto a me, quando non sei, ti sento che ti voglio. Stai vicino a me, e se non tornerai, lo so, la vita se ne andrà. Stai vicino a me, e se non tornerai, lo so, la vita se ne andrà.
Thank you to Carlos de Antonis and Sergio Salani for your moving performance today. This concludes our Sunday programming of the USHCC Virtual Conference. Join us here tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern for America's Business Future Plenary. Hasta pronto!